Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Stereo 3D Productions. I am playing wireless VR in the most immersive way you can have it right now. I'm trying out a fly swatting simulator, and I'm doing it with the Guardian bounds set to off. Come here, you little bastard. Now, I need to give a heads up, by the way. Whoa. Do not try this at home. It's dangerous. I'm an expert. I have a lot of experience with VR, and therefore, I kind of taught myself to play with the Guardian bounds off, and I really don't recommend you do this just casually like that. Oh, I'm gonna get it. Oh, fuck! Oh, shit! This showcase is going to cover the three big players of wireless VR: Steam Link, Oculus Airlink, and Virtual Desktop. Today I'm going to go through these interfaces one by one, detailing my experience with each, and ultimately we're going to compare them to find out which interface really is the best for wireless virtual reality. Originally, the plan was to make this showcase solely about Virtual Desktop, but in the course of my research I ended up doing a lot of direct comparisons between them all, and after enough time with Steam Link, Oculus Airlink, and Virtual Desktop, it only seemed logical that I cover all three in one go. So here's my new plan. I'm going to summarize my experience with each wireless interface, starting with Airlink, then Virtual Desktop, and finally Steam Link. With each, I'll go over the pros and the cons, and how each functions on its own. Finally, once we've gone through all three interfaces, I'm going to rank them against one another and let you know which one I would recommend for you to use as your daily VR driver. Look at all this broken glass! Airlink is where it all started for me. It's the first interface that allowed me to experience the magic of physically walking substantial distances in VR without using any locomotion input. It's the first interface that allowed me to lose complete track of where I am in my play space given the absence of a wire. My expectations were initially low. I mean, this is streaming video after all, and given at my first few runs I was actually forcing a Quest 1 to run the new tech, and didn't have an optimal Wi-Fi setup, using only a Wi-Fi 5 router, the one my ISP gave me, which could have been fine as you'll see later, but it also was not located close to my play space. Surprisingly, I was already able to push constant bit rates of around 50 megabits per second still, all running off a system on a GTX 1080 with an i7 6700K and 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. When you get started with wireless VR, there's a period of time you need to allow to pass before your excitement dies down and you start really noticing and being bothered by all the shortcomings of an image that is streamed to your headset as video rather than being a hard connection like DisplayPort. Shockingly, while Oculus Airlink was and is still very configurable, inexplicably Oculus, or Meta, don't expose very many options anywhere other than in their debug tool. This left a lot of folks assuming that this tech was simply bad. With Virtual Desktop breathing down Airlink's neck, the standard simply wasn't being matched, and I find this baffling since Airlink, it turns out, has been very capable. Not to mention, once I started using it with much better conditions in late 2021, basically same Wi-Fi router but with only a few feet of distance this time in an area with no interference at all, it's only gotten more reliable and better looking. From resolution to bitrate, everything's gone way up since I have this layout. Yes, it turns out that my router, running on 802.11ac Wi-Fi 5, the nothing special router given to me by my ISP, is actually up to the task after all. Fast forward to today, where I now have hundreds of hours of experience with this interface. It's one of my preferred ones given it's free, it's simple at the surface, and it may actually be one of the most customizable wireless interfaces still to this day. Let me show you how I run my setup. First, what you'll want to do is you'll launch the Meta Quest Link software and have your headset detected by it so you can go in its configuration. Go to the Devices tab, click on the headset you want to change the options for, and in the right pane go in the Graphics Preferences. From there we have two main settings, refresh rate and resolution. Yes, it's not much, but we can still thank Oculus for at least exposing these two. We're going to be changing a few other things through the dev tool after this, but right now you can either pick 72, 80, 90, or 120 Hz, but just pick 72 for now and disable automatic resolution. Honestly, the automatic option seems to just go for the lowest, worst possible value at all times. It is garbage, and pick a resolution factor. Note that we picked 72 Hz here because Link has this really dumb feature, by the way, where it changes the value of the default resolution as you change the refresh rate. This also affects the multipliers. Be mindful of this. Personally, I switched to 72 Hz specifically because the multipliers are correct at that rate and the default notch becomes the headset's native resolution. After I pick my resolution, I can change the refresh rate without having to worry about the multiplier fuckery. Normally, I would start at 1.0, right on the default notch on any given system, no matter the spec, since this is the headset's native resolution. Subsequently, I'd work my way either up or down given the observed performance. For the virtual desktop users, on this slider, 0.9x is potato, 1.0x at the notch is low, 1.1 is medium, 1.2 is high on the lower end, and if you go to the max, you'll be near ultra, roughly speaking. Personally, now being on an RTX 4080 with a 9900K and 32 gigs of RAM, I discovered I can go all the way to the max with a lot of games, but results can vary. Most of the time I prefer to stick to 1.2 for versatility, and on some occasions I'll tick it down to the upper end of 1.1. For the refresh rate, and yes, this is a big weakness of Airlink, pick 90 Hz but always run a short test session, say just 10 minutes with this refresh rate on because I've often had reliability issues myself. I have said it countless times and I'll say it again, 72 is Airlink's favorite refresh rate. It's not a good thing, it sets Airlink behind in a really important aspect of wireless VR, but it is the absolute truth. Once you apply those settings, the Quest Link app will prompt you to restart. Go ahead and let it do that. At your next session, you're going to fire up with the settings we've just put. However, we are not done. There's also the Oculus debug tool. This is a little tool that allows to access hidden options within the Oculus runtimes, a lot of which happen to be part of Link and Airlink. I'll put a full typical path to the folder where it's located because yes, Oculus installs this without a default shortcut. I actually use this tool so often that I set mine as a taskbar button. Whichever way you choose to launch it, just make sure you first establish an Airlink connection and then launch the Oculus debug tool. The reason why I use this tool so often to begin with is because asynchronous space warp keeps resetting to automatic, and this causes it to just randomly kick in unwarranted, and it's an effect I really dislike, so I disable it every session. Now for the Airlink related settings, first I set the encoder resolution width. This is the very most important option. It absolutely needs to be at least your headset's total horizontal resolution. I strongly believe that the internal default that Oculus give us is stupidly, inbredly, criminally low. I would not use Airlink without changing this value first. For the Quest 3, I set this to 4128. This matches exactly the resolution width of both the eye panels of the Quest 3. For the Quest 2, the value is a bit lower. 3664 will match your headset's displays. Yes, you can go above a 1-to-1 ratio here, but it's not necessary. This is the resolution of the actual video stream that gets sent over to the headset, and rendering that part at above 1.0 resolution won't bring that much benefit. Do be careful with older or lower end GPUs, say the equivalent of a GTX 1080 or below, as those may struggle with this value being too high, leading to even crashes. Drop it in 10% increments if you're having issues. Next, because I currently have very good Wi-Fi conditions, despite still using that very same Wi-Fi 5 router to this day, the one my ISP gave me, I disable encode dynamic bitrate so the quality remains even throughout my session. Next, I set my encode bitrate to 250 megabits per second. Keep in mind that this value is the highest my setup will allow. Anything above that will induce lag for me, but results may vary for you, especially if you have a really good current Wi-Fi 6 router within good conditions with little distance. Normally, I would be fine with the user interface's max value of 200, but they're letting me exceed that here, and I can work with an extra 50, so why not? Again, be careful with lower spec systems. You should be able to start at 200 and go up or down depending on the results you get. Last, make sure to disable link sharpening. Sharpening sucks. It mutilates the original image and adds shimmer to it. We don't want it, especially that we're running an encoder resolution width setting high enough to never warrant any video post-processing. Keep in mind that when you set options in the debug tool, they are set immediately and take effect without any further action. Also note that we did not use pixel per display override. Some of you may be familiar with that option given it originally was the only way to actually set a resolution in Oculus Link. Insane, I know. But now that we can use the Quest Link app, I simply opted to use that instead. With a configuration like this, Airlink becomes a competitive wireless interface in my opinion. If you want a good wired link configuration, by the way, these settings will also do great. Just crank the bitrate to 500 megabits per second, since it can take that much over the wire, except on lower spec systems where 300 to 400 might be the more suitable range. Be careful, by the way, this option applies to both Link and Airlink, wired and wireless, so remember to set it back down to 250 or less when you go back to Airlink. I made recordings using the Quest 3's onboard recording feature so you could see the difference between wireless VR interfaces, as what the Quest 3 is receiving in recording actually contains whatever imperfections, artifacts, or shortcomings that are in the actual image inside the headset. Sure, the Quest recording itself is encoded as well, but we should still be able to compare interfaces and codecs like this. Here I'm putting Airlink next to what Steam Link looks like for reference. Proof that Airlink is indeed a good step above, even in image quality. While you are limited when trying to push refresh rates, the resolution in Airlink very much meets the standard, and given this tool is free and has tons of configurability, provided you know how to open the debug tool, it's really shown its might throughout the time I've been using it for. While I have been using Virtual Desktop a lot in the process of doing research for this video, I also happen to revisit Airlink several times given I use it as my baseline. I was still satisfied with how this is able to compete. Hellblade looked amazing when I was doing Steam Link comparisons. Fallout 4 VR, a game full of potential for massive shimmer and MPEG encoder smearing, is still a treat and looking very sharp and clear. Virtual Desktop was the last interface I looked at, but I'm going to be covering it second here, given I have a lot to say about it, especially in regards to being an Airlink substitute. The beginnings with Virtual Desktop for me were somewhat of an explosion. I don't know why the settings started off automatically at godlike for me. This is the highest resolution setting, we'll go over that in a moment, but I ended up producing a Resident Evil 7 video running the game at the highest resolution I've ever seen in VR. Wire, no wire, this was a good 15% above the last highest I'd ever seen. What surprised me is despite the Steam VR display VR view window dropping frames like all hell, making the video recording mid at best, the in-headset experience was mostly smooth, along with some FPS VR evidence to back it up. Go figure, that was only the beginning. After a few sessions figuring out what settings compromises I have to make to improve the video recordings, I landed a nice balance that not only continued showing me some of the sharpest visuals I've ever seen in virtual reality, but also finally allowed the Steam VR Display VR view to run a lot smoother. During my initial impressions, the settings looked so good I was convinced it produces a better image than Oculus Link, the wired solution, on default settings. Yes, if you use wired link and you don't touch any settings, Virtual Desktop beats that quality over Wi-Fi. Of course, one of the most important games to look at through this headset was Fallout 4 VR, because it's honestly the one game that consistently gives wireless VR absolute brutal hell with the potential for shimmer and encoder artifacts in the fine detail. Through some research with the Virtual Desktop streaming settings and the Virtual Desktop streamer configuration, notably the codecs, I now have the very best wireless VR visuals I have ever seen. There's honestly only one thing that finally beats this tool, and it's by running Oculus Link wired with the same settings I use for Airlink, but with the bitrate jacked to 500 and the refresh rate at 90. Virtual Desktop is in fact the gold standard for wireless VR, and let me take you through my setup along with some advice for you. First, we're going to launch the Virtual Desktop Streamer app. This is a free app that runs on the PC and waits for a connection from a client. It has a few options we can set here. I'll give you a baseline to start with. Under the Accounts tab of the Virtual Desktop Streamer, you'll want to put in your Meta username, the display name, not the actual email. This is going to help the Quest 3 client discover your PC over the network. The most important thing here is the codec. I've tried out every single option in the list, and while often automatic will end up picking the best balance, you can use specific ones if you want. After trying out all 5 options, I can safely say that HEVC 10-bit is the best looking one, and I'll compare the others to that one. First, H.264 is just not up to par. I reckon maybe it should run faster, but I don't even get that from it. There's a lot of encoder artifacts, and even with the bitrate maxed out to 200, it still looks like a video stream rather than a VR output. The same goes for H.264 Plus, and actually, this one was a bit of a disappointment to me because while it allows a higher bitrate cap, up to 500 megabits per second, it also looks half as good, thus requiring twice the bitrate to save face. Next, there's the standard HEVC codec, which just doesn't look anything near as good as its 10-bit counterpart. It's capped at 200 megabits per second too, so there's no way to force it to save face. Finally, there's the AV1 codec, which seems to be a Quest 3 exclusive. While it's not quite as clear looking as the HEVC 10-bit codec, it still looks very good despite being capped at 200 megabits per second and may actually be the smoothest running one. In the end for me, it's been HEVC 10-bit all the way. It packs the best graphical fidelity, a low amount of artifacts, and despite being capped at 200, actually looks substantially better than H.264 Plus at 300. My bet is you'll get the best results with either AV1 or HEVC 10-bit, and I honestly think the automatic setting actually picks either one of those two already because it looks fine. For the rest of the options, I've only unchecked the option to adjust bitrate automatically. It seems my network conditions are good enough to run these bitrates at constant levels, and so I don't want the automatic adjust to ever undershoot things for no reason. The next step to launching Virtual Desktop is by getting the Quest client installed and fired up. You'll find this client directly on the Oculus store, and at the time of writing this video, the price for Virtual Desktop is $28.99 Canadian, so probably $20 US. Yes, that's the difference here. Virtual Desktop is the only interface that costs money. This will come into play later during my final recommendations, of course. When you launch the Virtual Desktop client, you should see your computer come up on the list. If it doesn't come up on the list, make sure you did put your Meta username in the Virtual Desktop Streamer app, and also, very importantly, make sure the Virtual Desktop Streamer app is actually running. Connect to your computer, at which point you should be able to see your PC's desktop. tap your left system button and the virtual desktop menu will slide in. Go to the Streaming tab where we can pick refresh rate, resolution, and other very important options. First, let's focus on the quality setting. Virtual Desktop offer these settings in the form of named tiers rather than numbers or sliders, something that I am mildly bothered by, and they go as follows. Potato is 90% the headset's native resolution. Low is 100, medium is 110, high is 120, ultra is 130, and godlike is 140%. If I understand correctly, this option affects both encoder resolution and render resolution at once, and while I wish there was a way to adjust both separately with fields or sliders, I will say the balance of options here work extremely well, and when using Steam VR, I can actually pick this as encoder resolution width, then change my actual render resolution through Steam VR. For this option, go with what suits your GPU the best. The suggestions under each label are actually really good, although if you run older stuff, you may be able to overshoot by a lot. Personally, my balance is in Ultra, with the occasional switch to High in edge cases like UEVR Injector, which always steals away a bit of performance. Next, there's the refresh rate. See, this is where it gets fun. They all work. They all work and they work really well. I have done most of my testing at 90 Hz and I've never run into a single hitch, no latency, and not even a single damn Wi-Fi freakout. Given Skyrim VR is a much lighter game than some of the more recent stuff, I ran that one at 120 Hz, which by the way, Virtual Desktop plays a funny sound when you pick that option.
Holy shit.
And at the end of the session, the average was above 119 frames per second. Later, I tried a similar experiment with Fallout 4 VR. Average above 118 frames per second. Not only did the games run well, but I could actually feel the smoothness in the headset when doing extremely quick head movements. It is worth noting this is the only wireless interface that has run every refresh rate without any issues, including 120. For the bitrate, I max it out for most of the codecs, 200 megabits per second. In the case of H.264 Plus, we have access to more, being able to go up to 500 megabits per second, but as you saw earlier with Airlink, I have to be careful with it. But being a VBR codec, I am able to use it up to 300 megabits per second. For the rest of the options in my case, given I'm not upscaling, sharpening goes to 0. The HEVC 10-bit codec is a bit bright, so I set my gamma to 0.85, and given my aim is to always run the games at full rate, I completely disable the synchronous space warp. Yes, this is the same MO as Airlink. Now, this tool has extra features. It can intake your Quest's pass-through video for use with tools such as Reality Mixer. It can emulate an index kit entirely, and interestingly, it can also emulate Steam VR body trackers. This feature actually uses real upper body tracking and virtual legs that are inferred from the position of your hips and arms. I actually did try this, and I was impressed at how far more realistic my IK movements were with the upper body tracking at work. Virtual Desktop is a solid, reliable, high-fidelity wireless VR interface that quickly grew on me to the point where it quickly became my go-to option when doing most my VR gameplay. I still use Airlink here and there for edge cases where compatibility just works out better, like for example Borderlands 3 with UEVR where I can't use the controller system button correctly through Virtual Desktop, and I still use the wired link solution for low latency simulations like iRacing, but in the end I credit Virtual Desktop as the runtime behind over 60% of my gameplay in the last 3 months. My only complaint, and this is a very minor complaint, is that the resolution quality levels don't have a custom mode where we can enter numbers or use sliders for fine adjustments, along with the ability to access render resolution and encoder resolution separately like with the other runtimes. However, I will say the increments we are offered are very good, so it's not the end of the world, but it would be nice if those tiers at least displayed the actual number they're going to be using. I would love to know ahead of time what those exact resolution numbers are before I make a choice. All in all, Virtual Desktop has proven itself to be dependable and solid, and I use it almost all the time now. Steam Link is a special case for me, given it was the first wireless interface other than Airlink that I ever used. Back in January this year, Oculus pushed an update that, go figure, partly broke Airlink for roughly a week. The encoder would lose its shit and mess up the image every few minutes, taking a good 15 seconds to recover each time. Very frustrating. This pushed me to try an alternative in the hopes of having a backup solution. My first experience with Steam Link was positive. I ran Fallout 4 VR in a brief test session, and given I used mostly default settings besides setting a much higher bitrate at around 250 megabits per second, the stream itself ran smoothly, albeit with a resolution that is obviously too low. Yes, Steam Link launches with a render resolution that matches the Quest 3's native resolution, but the problem here is the encoder resolution width being very limited. Once I got down to business, trying to make this interface rise to a competitive level, this is the first option I wanted to max out, and this proved to be Steam Link's biggest problem. Not only is the maximum on the settings slider 1344 per eye, this would be the equivalent of entering 2688 in the Oculus debug tool, since that one uses the product of both eyes in width, while Steam Link uses a per eye value. But once I found a way to bypass this limit and enter a higher value in the settings text file, it looks like it actually caps out at 1536, the equivalent of entering 3072 in the Oculus debug tool. Remember now, we're actually able to use 4128 in the Oculus debug tool, meaning Steam Link caps out at about 74% of the Quest 3's native resolution, which is abhorrently low and immediately evident in the headset. See, while you can use any render resolution you want, encoder resolution width is basically the resolution at which the video stream sent to your headset will be encoded at. So it doesn't matter with Steam Link whether you're super sampling at 200% native render resolution on a beautiful RTX 4090, Steam Link doesn't care, it's still going to encode a final resolution width at 74% of the Quest 3's native resolution. Keep in mind, even on previous gen hardware, like the Quest 2, that encoder resolution width is still only 84% of that headset's. That's right, you're practically sending a Gen 1 VR resolution stream to your headset through this tool. While the issue itself is already a big problem, it needs to be noted that increasing the encoder resolution width with this tool actually degrades the stream performance. And I stress the stream performance. See, while this won't show in your FPS VR window, because the game itself will be running very well, in your headset it will be a different story. With a maxed out encoder resolution width, one that isn't even at par with the headset, mind you, the interface just starts dropping frames and time warping to no end. This will give you the impression that your game is actually struggling to run. This is the only interface I've ever experienced this consistently with, not in batches or freakouts like Airlink, but rather just a steady going droppage with substantial latency. I get why they capped encoder resolution width so low, because clearly this thing is not up to snuff for real Gen 3 VR resolutions. It just is not. Furthermore, we do not have the option for constant bitrate here, and it honestly shows. I don't think this thing has ever even spiked above 100 megabits per second, despite me having the bitrate set at 270 megabits per second. I swear, it's something with the codec they're using and the lack of a constant bitrate option. This thing just produces visual awfulness even at high bitrates. And if you'll recall, I actually have to be careful when nearing 250 megabits per second, both with Airlink and with Virtual Desktop. The fact that this thing lets me put up to 350 without actually having any stream lag is telling, because VBR is just running a lot lower than what you've set. The final breaking point for Steam Link is how bad the actual video stream looks. It's like vanilla H.264 running on the baseline profile. It's just uniquely terrible. Again, it's hard to compare from onboard recordings, but I'm gonna put a video of Steam Link next to Virtual Desktop on HEVC 10-bit. It's a no contest, even with the HEVC 10-bit at lower bit rates. You'd think that with a lower encoder resolution and maybe dropped frames along the way, at least the stream would manage to deliver more quality. Well, no, it doesn't. It is by far the worst looking interface, using a codec that produces the most encoder artifacts, blocking, smearing, halos, you name it, you'll see it. Not only did Fallout 4 VR look a mess in this thing, but so did Skyrim VR. Let's not even get into the refresh rates with this thing. Yes, it offers a wide variety of them, but so far only 72Hz have felt like what it's supposed to be. 90Hz does not run steadily and it starts time warping a lot, and 120Hz is absolutely nothing like what 120Hz is supposed to feel. It's almost as if it was dropping a bunch of frames at random, time warping the ones that do make it through, and it's just not smooth at all. The configurability of this tool is okay. We've seen all of it during my Steam Link showcase with Fallout 4 VR. Look, we have sliders for our render resolution and our encoder resolution separately, which is actually cool, and one can try to mess with the Steam Remote Play options to try and get different results. Switching refresh rates is also super easy. You do it the same way as you would with the index. There's a lot of things that are done right here. You go directly through Steam VR without the overhead of middleman runtimes. You have a free tool that will easily work right out of the box, but the problem is it's not working at the level it should for third generation VR. This would have been very impressive back in 2021, but at this point in time, it really falls short of expectations. It actually sabotages a high-end system by under-delivering on all the hard work the hardware is doing to actually deliver some nice graphics and a smooth frame rate. I actually revisited Steam Link for the first time in months since I made my showcase video on it, while writing the script for this video. Just because I wanted to see if anything has improved, something Steam Link desperately needs to do. And no, everything is still exactly the same with these stupidly low limits, stuttery performance, and inferior image quality. As I feared, this is really just a cute novelty for Valve rather than it being a real undertaking, and they haven't taken it very seriously at all. I can be such a fucking idiot! Fuck! Having gone through all three mainstream wireless VR interfaces, I'm now going to score them using three categories, each being scored out of 10. First, image quality. This is the second most important category. Is the image you see in the headset as clear and as close as possible to being a DisplayPort wired connection? Is the tool capable of even allowing you to tweak this image quality? Next, configurability. Does the interface allow you to easily configure it with values that can scale to your system, low, mid, or high end? And does it expose enough values to allow the best possible balance? Finally, I'll rate them on stream reliability, which is the most important category. You cannot get good wireless VR without a reliable video stream. Intermittent stutter or freakouts, steady judder, latency, large amounts of time warp, these are things that can really ruin a VR session even in small batches throughout. Wireless VR is at its best when you can actually forget there's a high bitrate stream being thrown at your headset. Once we're done, we'll make an average out of this score, which will serve as the overall score for each interface, and it will be on a scale of 100. For Airlink, image quality stands at a solid 8 out of 10. Now, I need to note that this gets its score thanks to the settings I've shown earlier in this very video. Were you running Airlink on default settings right out of the box, this value would actually drop to a 6, which very likely explains why Airlink puts off so many players at first. It's very important to increase a few things before you get started with this interface. Given the beginning values are so criminally low, they can use a kick even on lower end systems. Virtual Desktop's image quality lands at a 9 out of 10. That's right, I don't want to rate anything as perfect over here, and this is as close as it'll get. Virtual Desktop has, from every single angle, proven it is the dominant choice when it comes to a clean image with as little artifacts as possible. Lower-end systems may fare better on the lesser codecs, which don't produce as good as an image, but that is actually one of the pros of Virtual Desktop, as it seems to be capable to scale to all sorts of systems with appropriate compromises in between. Steam Link's image quality lands at a whopping 5 out of 10. It's just not there. Yeah, if you switch Virtual Desktop to the vanilla H.264 codec, drop the bitrate halfway down, you'll get a similarly bad image quality, but frankly, because of the super low encoder resolution width Steam Link offers, there's just no way this thing can be made to look half good. Not to mention, it seems to have this built-in sharpening we can't adjust or disable, and it just makes the image full of shimmer and substantially worse. Now, for configurability, we have a tie between Airlink and Virtual Desktop at 8 out of 10. Yeah, this is the part a lot of people don't realize. Airlink is actually really configurable, provided you use the debug tool. Once you master that thing, you can fine-tune Airlink to any system in existence, and while it doesn't have the fancy emulation and body tracker features, I still think the ability to fine-tweak all the resolution and encoder values is really neat. Virtual Desktop loses a bit of ground by only offering the resolution increments in tiers, and they don't show what the numeric values of these settings are. I really wish they added this so I knew ahead of time what resolution I'll be using exactly. They make up with the fact that they have all these other neat features like pass-through and the tracking options. Steam Link gets a configurability rating of 6 out of 10. Being its strongest point, Steam Link does expose pretty much all the options relevant to the video stream directly in its UI. The issue here are the limits we currently have, specifically the encoder resolution width. What good is it if the only viable option is the max, or a slightly higher value than we can enter through a text file? Sure, you can configure Link, but it won't save the interface from looking and or running like crap. Stream reliability is an interesting showdown. Airlink here only scores a 7 out of 10, and that's because it can't seem to be able to handle a high refresh rate with a high resolution both at the same time. It loves to have intermittent freakouts when you push the boundaries, and that's honestly annoying when you're just trying to enjoy a long VR session with above par resolutions and refresh rates. These freakouts don't end your session by any means, and nor are they very frequent, but they're enough to really take you out of it for a good minute, and can happen every 15 to 45 minutes at random when your refresh rate and resolution are both very high. Virtual Desktop is 10 out of 10 in reliability. I don't want to rate anything as perfect here, but fuck you, I don't have a choice. Virtual Desktop has actually, I shit you not, been absolutely perfect in this aspect. It's the only interface to date that has never shown excessive latency, and also the only one completely free of any intermittent issues whatsoever. When you start a Virtual Desktop session, it establishes and runs in a certain way, and it will continue to run that way for the duration of your play. Yes, I am actually baffled by how so very excellent Virtual Desktop has been in this respect. Actual perfection, no joke. Finally, Steam Link is the slow kid in the back of wireless VR class picking its nose, getting screamed at by the teacher. Stream reliability for Steam Link is only 5 out of 10. It's that bad. Look, it's not like it will outright drop a connection or even have freakouts like Airlink does, but the consistent performance is so bad, stuttery, delayed, and time-warped to inferno that by its consistent shittiness, it just cannot be rated any higher despite not encountering any terminal issues along the way. Now we add all these scores together and divide by 3 and multiply by 10 for the percentage, and in the end we're ranking Virtual Desktop at number 1 with a 90% average, Airlink at number 2 with 76%, and finally, far behind, Steam Link at a mediocre 53%. This is pretty representative of how all this saga went down on the sister channel Stereo 3D Plays. I was initially far more forgiving towards Steam Link up until I first saw Virtual Desktop. But also, when I realized that it could actually push Airlink to look closer to Virtual Desktop in terms of quality, something Steam Link could not even stay remotely in the vicinity of, let alone keep close or compete, increasingly based on my experience and the numbers I'm looking at, I began to see Steam Link as a little side project Valve pulled off while they were bored and nothing that would be substantial to the actual selection of real wireless VR interfaces. Along every step of the way, Virtual Desktop proved itself as the clear leader, and surprisingly, very surprisingly, Airlink showed that it was a worthy little tool despite its own limitations. After a very challenging video, it's fucking hell, nothing better than a refreshing glass of fucking water. It's fake glass. It's all fake glass, all right? I didn't, no actual wine bottles, wine glasses, or drinking glasses were hurt during the making of this video. Now, with Virtual Desktop ranked as the #1 interface, do I recommend it? Well, you'll be surprised to hear me say this. Depends. Not the adult diaper brand, by the way. I mean, it depends on how much VR you plan on doing, what VR hardware you have, and how picky you get in terms of bitrate, refresh rate, and resolutions. Of course, there is another factor, and that's the fact the best tool is actually not free, and the one ranked right behind it is actually quite good on its own merit. So I'll put it this way. If you're on a high-end system, RTX 4080 or above, 10th gen CPU, big 32GB pool of yummy RAM, somewhere in that ballpark, if you have a router that's not crowded in an environment without excessive interference and a short amount of distance, then yeah, Virtual Desktop is most definitely for you. Especially if you're one to be picky on resolution clarity and refresh rates, this is the only interface that will actually meet the standard you should expect from a wired DisplayPort VR output. You can push some interesting limits with Airlink, but thanks to its bulletproof reliability, Virtual Desktop will outdo all of that, and it will really show you the next level of wireless VR. If you're on a mid-end system, say an RTX 4070, and you too are sporting a Quest 3, it's hard to say go for Virtual Desktop only for one reason. The Quest 3 runs at high resolutions. I mean, these are getting ridiculous. Even an RTX 4070 will be very challenged by that. The limits that Airlink can operate at are actually super suitable for a mid-end system, and so I don't see it necessary to reach for Virtual Desktop, given the limits you can cross with that tool may actually exceed the limits your hardware is imposing on you. It's up to you. Of course, Virtual Desktop can be finely tuned to run just as great or better than Airlink on a mid-end system, and it does still come with all these wonderful, unique features, so this drills down to a case-by-case basis. I do in the end highly recommend Virtual Desktop, only because it's proven to be so reliable. Only a wire could actually challenge this fidelity, and that is likely true on any system, low, mid, or high-end. Finally, I need to give a word about Steam Link. When I see someone write Steam Link and RTX 4090 in the same sentence, I cry inside. I cry because I know a state-of-the-art GPU is being abused, its power wasted, thrown into the abyss of Steam Link's horrendous flow. If you can't see the damn massive latency, there's no way you're not seeing the low encoder resolution with. This is not an opinion, it's objective. A low encoder resolution, only 74% that of the headset's full resolution, is mortally a low limit that makes the image look like garbage. Please, if you have an RTX 4090, just do the right thing. Stop abusing your GPU and get Virtual Desktop. Steam Link is criminally bad, especially in a high-end system where Virtual Desktop will let you run at double the encoder resolution. Double, for Christ's sake! Okay, that's finally it for this massive wireless VR showcase, along with the saga that went behind the making of this on Stereo 3D Plays. I do want to invite you to drop by there and hang out. Most of what I produce on this channel is initially formed on the second channel, where I'll do some research, try new things, discover what I want to talk about next, or just simply play another part of my handful of ongoing Let's Play series. This has been Stereo 3D Productions. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. That is awesome. You are awesome. And I shall see you next time. I still have spares. I was so worried about doing multiple takes. Because the second something goes wrong, right, you broke the item, so you need a bunch. But maybe I'll save these for a special occasion. We're going to have some Bordeaux together.